Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world. And so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. And go and get yourself that lovely, sparkling, effervescent drink, whatever it is that you enjoy drinking. And if it's something rather unusual, like egg drop coffee or something like that, let me know about it, because I do love hearing from you. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, sometimes in life we react to an adverse situation in ways we never envisaged. I have a friend who woke up one night to find a strange man standing at the end of her bed. That has got to be one of the scariest things to happen to a young girl. She told me she didn't scream or cry out for help, as you would have expected her to have done. She doesn't actually even remember feeling fear. It was like she was overcome with a stoic sense of calm that surprised even her. Luckily, her brother in the next room overheard the man entering her bedroom. He sensed something untoward was going on, so he quickly called the police. The man was subsequently arrested. He had a long history of sexual assault behind him, so my friend had a lucky escape. I don't understand why I didn't scream, she told me. I was to discover that when an adverse experience happened in my own life, that I also didn't react in the way that I anticipated that I should react, in an adverse situation, that is. Indeed, all these years later, when I reflect on my reaction to this event, it is something that brings me a measure of shame, which is why the story has not been shared until now, which is easily 12 years after the event. At the time, I was living in Buffalo Grove in Chicago, Illinois, with my parents and my younger brother Cole. We were living in an updated colonial home, in a serene, peaceful, green leafy neighborhood, 40 minutes from the town's center. And what is so great about this marvelous area is we're close to Buffalo Creek Forest Reserve and Potawatomi Woods. We have fabulous golf courses, bowling arcades and swimming opportunities here, along with marvelous places to eat, fabulous bakeries that sell the very best apple fritters you've ever tasted. I went to Buffalo Grove High School and would walk home from school every day, providing, of course, that the weather was good. We have a typical continental climate here in Chicago, which means we have cold winters, warm summers. But personally, I love the moderate temperatures of both spring and autumn here the most. Unfortunately, while Chicago has many plus sides to living here, like affordable living costs and amazing reliable public transport, we are a city with a higher crime rate, much more so than the national average, which is why growing up, I was exceedingly grateful that both my parents lived in such a congenial, tranquil part of the city, which is less predisposed to the consequences of crime. I was 20 years old when my mother asked me if I'd be interested in looking after my 5-year-old nephew, Eaton, as my aunt and uncle were going on an overseas trip to Italy, where they were spending time in Rome, Tuscany and Florence. They need someone to look after little Eaton, my mother had said. They live in Idaho. I've never been there, but I believe it's lovely. And what's more, they'll pay you generously for your time and trouble. They're not short of a bob or two. It'll be a fabulous break for you, being in the countryside and getting acquainted with your nephew. You can fly down a day earlier. I think that would be a great idea. The flights from Chicago to Idaho are about 3 hours, so you can learn about your nephew's routines before Liz and her husband Hugh finally leave for Italy. I was speaking to my sister Liz about it. She simply loves the idea of you taking care of your nephew, whom you've never met, of course. I don't know why it came to me, but I thought about how recently you've been complaining a lot about wanting to get out of Chicago for a while. Furthermore, you love kids, don't you? Liz wants to feel that she can leave Eaton, her son, in heedfully responsible hands. You fit the bill nicely, sweetheart. Furthermore, she says you can use her car, and even ride her horse Silver, provided you take Eaton along with you as well. Of course, it goes without saying, you mustn't leave your cousin unattended. I gather Silver's quite a beauty, a very well-behaved horse, so you can happily ride her together. Where exactly do they live in Idaho? Well, they live close to the town of Stanley, near the Sawtooth mountain range, where there are stunning hiking trails and beautiful hot springs, I gather. They have a small farm there, where they grow potatoes. My aunt and uncle had arranged for a taxi to pick me up from the Magic Valley Regional Airport, which is in Twin Falls, and about 149 miles from the city of Stanley. I felt excited, if not a little nervous and apprehensive about seeing my aunt again. The last time I'd seen her was 5 years prior at my grandmother's funeral, which was a very morbid, depressing affair, as there wasn't a dry eye in the church, as so many grieved her abrupt, unheralded passing. In truth, I was so upset about my grandmother's fortuitous death, a sudden, unexpected, inadvertent stroke that no one ever saw coming. I was so grief-stricken at the time that when I met Aunt Liz, I barely remembered her at all. Ironically, my mother chatted with her sister Liz every day, on Twitter and Facebook, so they were always in touch on social media. But it was such a pity we never connected much as a family, which was something both my mother and her sister Liz were desirous to change. We should be like other American families, my aunt would say. You hear about people travelling all across the country for Thanksgiving and Christmas to celebrate these festive celebratory occasions together. But we do bog all about getting together. We should be heartily ashamed of ourselves, as geographically between us there's only a 3-hour flight. Don't forget we're talking about some American families that actually loathe each other, but still manage to make the effort to get together for Christmas and Thanksgiving, dutifully making that effort to reconnect with each other every single year. We love each other to death, so what the heck is wrong with us? Our excuses are shamefully pitiful. Suffice to say, my aunt had frequently told my mother they lived in a beautiful part of the world. But honestly, as I sat back in the taxi, absorbing the transfixing mountain views, the undulating viridescent meadows ablaze with colourful wild flowers, the rugged sculptural landscape, the cobalt blue sky, the towering silhouettes of the vertical trees from my backseat window, I was beginning to realise that Liz had significantly downplayed, rather minimised how magnificent Idaho actually was. I couldn't for the life of me fathom as to why she would do this. Maybe she didn't want my mother to feel depressed and downcast about living in a bustling, busy city, as my mother adored the natural world, and pregnantly rather envied her sister for her rustic, relaxed, carefree, countrified lifestyle. She had tirelessly begged my father to leave his high-profile job in the city, to relocate to the countryside, to embrace a more relaxed way of living, and, of course, to be close to her sister Liz. But it looked unlikely to ever happen. My father loved Chicago. It was in his blood. He was hell-bent on staying there, like a resolute redwood tree that is not easily shifted. And with a father as stubborn as an ox, with a hide as tough as a rhino, a move to Idaho was not likely to be on the cards any time soon. But one could dream, couldn't one? And based on the exquisite views I was observing outside my window, I did fancy moving to this part of the world. "So you're from Chicago, are you, love?" says the taxi driver, once he picked me up from the airport and gently placed my suitcase in the back of the trunk, clearly surprised that I was travelling so light. But I saw no point in travelling with an excess of clothes. "That's right," I said politely. "Well, welcome to Idaho, the quintessential state with some of the lowest crime rates." "Really?" I said. "I didn't know that." "That's right, and if that's not good enough for you, we also have considerably good weather over here, although Boise has the best up here. In the mountains it does tend to get rather cold, and snowy in winter, of course." "I think it's always colder in winter when you live near the mountains. It can get very cold in Chicago as well during the winter." "I think this must be it," said the taxi driver, a while later, swiftly turning his vehicle through a wide-open wrought-iron gate with a sign that read, "Birchwood Spud Farm." "Looks like you won't be running out of potatoes on your dinner plate staying here," the taxi driver chuckled. "No potato famines for you, I don't think. Best vegetable in the world, if you ask me, especially mashed, fried or roasted. And by the looks of things, this farm has got a plethora of potatoes." The driver was not wrong about that. It would seem that nestling cosily, about 50 feet from the left-hand side of the road, were long sprawling borders of raised uniform green heads, bountiful leaves that stretched out forever in a vertical straight column or trajectory, that circumscribed the potato plants themselves. In the furthest distance, the plants were hedged in neatly by the distinctive perpendicular upstanding clusters of trees that curtained the bottommost parts of the field. The right-hand side of the road was spread-eagled with fabulous sweeping meadows, with knee-high grasses filled with a kaleidoscope of colourful wild flowers, and scattered liberally with occasional trees. The taxi rode smoothly down the slightly overgrown rugged driveway, towards an aesthetically pleasing farmhouse, easy on the eye, an attractive peach-coloured craftsman-styled home, with a low-pitched grey roof, overhanging eaves, heavy tapered columns, white patterned window panes, and a covered porch. The peach colour rather reminded me of a rich orange sunset. Its flattering earthy colours magnified the natural flora and fauna of the landscape, complemented by a generous set-up of outbuildings, including a stable block, a garage, workshop and barn. I could see 3 grey dappled horses grazing happily in the meadow, and on the horizon the rise and fall of the craggy mountains that were very sculptural. I will admit the views were transfixing, and I was well aware that I was exceedingly lucky to be here. The taxi immediately ground to a halt. My energetic driver jumped out of his truck faster than a March hare, pulling my light suitcase out of the trunk, eagerly opening my car door for me. I climbed out of the back seat, thanking the driver profusely and slipping a generous tip in his hands, of which he was grateful for. He gave me a big toothy grin, showing off a perfect set of white pearly teeth that were even more pronounced and accentuated by his walnut-coloured Middle Eastern skin tone. "Enjoy your holiday in Idaho," he says, giving me a wink. "Eat some of those delicious potatoes out there for me, will you?" he says. I watched the taxi reverse, gliding away down the road, while the taxi driver gave me a congenial hoot with a quick tap of his horn, and soon his truck was all but a dot on the horizon. I stood there still for a brief second, drawing in a deep breath. I absorbed my environment with a thankful reverence. 2 weeks on my own, spent in a fabulous place like this. It was going to be brilliant, better than brilliant, absolutely amazing. I could see the ornate black front door, with a gleaming gold lion knocker, open. A slender woman clad in snugly fitting jeans, wearing a blue sweatshirt, with the loud words, "I love Idaho," splashed magnanimously across the fabric, in white curly letters. She came racing down the steps with her arms outstretched. She was thrilled to see me. I was somewhat taken aback by the effusive, gushing welcome I received. I liked the gregarious, vociferous woman at once. She threw me into her arms. "Brianna, it's so good to see you! How long has it been?" she says, giving me the tightest, unreserved emotional hug. "I think about 5 years ago," I said. "Well, it was at my grandmother's funeral, actually." "That's right, it was, wasn't it? Oh, that was such a terribly sad day, wasn't it? It's been far too long, Brianna, as I keep saying to your mother all the time. My word," she says, stepping back to study me closely. "I do believe you've grown into a very elegant young lady. Actually, you rather remind me a lot of my mother, your late grandmother, in photographs I've seen of her when she was a young girl. You're the spitting image of her, actually. She had the gorgeous Titian colouring you have, and blue eyes. Now come on in. I want you to meet the rest of the gang, if you can call us that." I noticed Liz looked much younger than my mother, even with such a tiny age difference between the two of them. Maybe the stressful demands of my mother's high-pressure job in the city of Chicago been less than kind on her skin, extracting a capacious toll on her physical appearance, as stress can be regretfully as taxing as the sun itself. It would seem my mother looked yonks older than her sister Liz, whom didn't even have a wrinkle on her fair skin, and wasn't even wearing a stitch of makeup either, which made her appear even younger. I noticed her black hair was pulled away neatly in a ponytail from her face. I couldn't help but reflect that she could easily have fitted in with a group of my girlfriends, and no one would have suspected she was older than any of us. Liz's husband was very reserved, a quiet man, who, although younger than his wife by a couple of years, looked significantly older than she did, with a weathered, bronze, slightly rugged complexion, a prickly silvery grey stubble that bedecked his chin.
He looked every inch the quintessential farmer, wearing a blue plaid shirt, denim jeans, and cowboy boots. A solitary type of man that liked to hang out on his own, I guessed. I perceived he was not fond of meeting strangers, of which clearly he considered I was one. My mother had warned me he was very reticent, self-effacing, and rather evasive. Maybe he was the real reason why our families had never got together at Thanksgiving and Christmas over the years. He looked almost as if family reunions, social niceties and interactions of the like would naturally be like the quintessential albatross around his neck. "This is my husband Hugh," says Liz. "Hugh, this is my niece Brianna, who's going to look after Eaton for us while we're away. Aren't we lucky to have Eaton being taken care of by such a reliable niece? I keep counting my blessings. We don't have to leave Eaton in the charge of some unreliable, indifferent childminder who's more interested in her cell phone than watching over my son, which is so often the case."
"Absolutely," said Hugh. "This is most kind of you indeed, Brianna, coming all the way from Chicago especially for us. As my wife Liz says, we are exceedingly grateful to you for taking on this job. We would not be comfortable at all going to Italy if our son was not in very good hands and taken well care of. We know we can rely on you to take good care of him."
Hugh did not even reach out to shake my hand in his, but I didn't take any offence, as my mother had warned me that he was painfully shy. The family had 2 friendly French overweight ebullient bulldogs, who came bounding up towards me, and were very affectionate, rolling on their backs, demanding to have their podgy stomachs tickled, of which I was exceedingly happy to oblige, as I adore animals. Their flat noses were too adorable, and they were the kind of dogs that were a pleasure to have around, as they oozed personality.
"Eaton, sweetheart, where are you? Your cousin Brianna's here. She's come all the way from Chicago to see you. Come on, aren't you going to come and say hello?"
The cutest young boy with a dazzling smile emerged. He had brown short-cropped hair that was punked up in the middle like a hedgehog, with bright blue eyes that twinkled like stars. He came trotting up to me so confidently and gave me the biggest all-embracing hug. Clearly not suffering from his father's bashfulness, that was very clear.
"You never told me that Cousin Brianna was so pretty, Mummy," he said.
Ooh, he was quite the little charmer, I thought to myself, for one so young. When he was older, he was clearly going to break many a heart. That was poignantly obvious.
"Hello, Eaton," I said. "It's good to finally meet you. Mum told me lots about you, but you're much cooler than I ever imagined you'd be." "You too. I've been so excited to meet you, Brianna. I'm glad you're going to look after me. I can show you where they do the best ice creams in town. They're so yummy there, and we can go to the movies together. We're going to have so much fun now that we have the adults out of our hair."
"Well, I'm looking forward to it, Eaton. I really am." It was a day after Liz and Hugh had finally left for Italy that I began to settle down into the farmhouse like a duck to water. It was hard not to enjoy my lackadaisical environment, wallowing in the lap of luxury, surrounded by such breathtaking beauty. It was clear that my aunt's family were wealthy, as their house was fitted with Bang & Olufsen musical centres, luxurious furnishings, and state-of-the-art fixtures and fittings. I was in my element. I enjoyed my nephew's company, who was as bright as a button and fun to be around. At 8 years old, he was unusually clever. My Uncle Hugh had informed me the potatoes were generous crops and easy to manage, but I didn't have to worry about them at all. There would be a local boy visiting that would attend to some of the farming duties, while my uncle and aunt were away for 2 weeks, which included mucking out the stables and feeding the horses daily. So in reality, Eaton and I could have a plethora of quality time together without worrying about any of the practicalities of running a farm, apart from slapping some meals together and throwing dirty dishes into the dishwasher, which was about as hard as it got. We rode bicycles and ATVs around the countryside together, along with Silver the horse, down some of the most breathtaking, beautiful horse-riding trails I've ever seen. We visited the town for ice cream and pizza, and we went to the movies and did so much more. It was one hot morning in mid-August when the sunshine filtered through the crack in my bedroom windows in bright shafts of light. Eaton came bounding into my room. I was fast asleep at the time and awoken by him jumping up and down the mattress of my bed like a trampoline. "Wake up, Brianna! Wake up! Wake up, you sleepyhead!" he was saying. The two French bulldogs were infected by his ebullient effervescence and were jumping up and down against my mattress and yapping loudly. "Eaton," I groaned, feeling ever so slightly peeved. "Can't you see I'm trying to sleep? Just give me a wee bit longer, won't you? I'm just very tired this morning." "I'm up, Brianna. Have you forgotten? You're supposed to be looking after me, not the other way round," he protested cheekily. "If I'm up, then you need to be up too. You're the only lazy bum around here. Everyone else is up. Even our lazy bulldogs are up, which proves that you are very, very lazy." "All right," I groaned. "I'm getting up, but give me a minute, will you? I'm older than you. It takes me a little longer to get up." "I know what we should do. Let's go huckleberry picking. There are lots of huckleberries in the woods growing under bushes at this time of the year. My mother always makes yummy sauce to serve with the vanilla ice cream and pancakes using huckleberries. Last year we picked so many, my mother even made jam. She's still got some in the store cupboard if you want to taste it. It's really nice." "Huckleberries," I said, in a sleepy state. "But are they even ripe at this time of year?" "Of course! It's August, silly. There's lots in the wood grove and they're sweet. Please, please can't we go?" "All right, Eaton. Let's go huckleberry picking. Go and get a couple of bows for us to collect some berries with, will you?" "We don't need bows. We need buckets. We're going to pick lots of berries. You're the best, Brianna. You're the absolute best. The best cousin in the whole world. Thank you so much." If I had perceived that going picking for huckleberries would end up wrenching the rug from beneath my feet, turning my entire world upside down, so that my clouded, injudicious mind would become as fluffy and irrational as white cotton wool, while all practical common sense and insightful thinking would fleetingly alienate and aggress itself from me, so that I would fail to engage in sound reasoning or logical introspection or the rational maturity of a seasoned adult, I did not fathom for a moment that I would be consumed by a bitter, nauseous, hopeless despair that I'd never tasted before on my tongue, that defiled the sweet taste of the berries we'd been eating earlier on. How could a simple day of berry picking go so badly wrong? I was 20 years old, for goodness sake. This kind of direful horror was not something I would ever consider rearing its ugly head, manifesting itself in my reality. But it did. And the grievous part of it all is I didn't even have the remotest suggestive inkling, or shall we say prognostic hunch, that this day would ultimately, indelibly remain marked on my life forever, like an unsightly tattoo that you have done on an impulsive moment of drunken inebriation that you always regret. I mean, what harm could there be in a humble engagement, picking a plethora of black or purple sweet delicious wild berries in a wood grove, for goodness sake? It was a harmless, innocuous activity, enjoyed by so many at this time of year. Besides, the idea of berry picking held rather great appeal for me. Maybe I'd try my hand at experimenting with some jam making and adding my collection of jams to proudly join my aunts in her pantry, like new sweet-tasting recruits joining an army battalion. So there we were, me and Eaton, jubilantly skipping along like brother and sister, without a care in the world, with a bucket and pail in our hands, you could say. Indeed, it seemed as if the wide age gap between us had dissipated like the white smoke of a chimney, as if I'd backtracked in time, becoming 8 years old all over again. I certainly felt like it, as if all the cares of the world, like my studying back at home in Chicago, were no longer relevant, or even remotely connected with my life right now, and had fleetingly been extinguished from my mind. I was obliviously unaware of what was soon to unfold on the seemingly benign day, with two ebullient French bulldogs waddling close behind us, as they were on the portly side, as they could have done with possibly losing a couple of pounds, if I'm being brutally honest. But Aunt Liz admitted she couldn't help spoiling the two of them, and gave them broiled chicken regularly. They are part of my extended family, she told me. I don't see them as just dogs. They're family members.
So there we were, ready for our marvellously enterprising berry-picking adventure, faithfully armed with 2 large buckets in our hands, which I clandestinely thought were a little optimistic for berry-picking, but Eaton insisted they were perfect. And what did I know? I'd never picked huckleberries before a day in my life. We walked energetically through the long knee-high grass of the meadow, dappled with bright yellow wildflowers, towards the large, sprawling, eclectic clusters of trees that I noticed were a congenial mix of Douglas firs, white pines, Engelmann spruces, Pacific yews, red cedars, hemlocks and larches. It was a hot day, the radiant shafts of white sun, magnanimous in the warmth that had suppurated over our shoulders and necks, like a moist, warm sauna, as there was a rising, unpleasant humidity in the air that was progressively advancing in its intensity, so seeking light relief in the woodgrove seemed like a promising idea. Ostensibly, if you percolated in the sun for long enough, you could potentially get badly burnt in weather like this, and I knew it was unusual for Idaho to be this humid in August, but the moist heat was audacious, and even behind my neck I was beginning to sweat. Relief greeted us like an affectionate friend as we entered the woodgrove. The significantly cooler, refreshing temperatures were like thoroughly enjoying a fortifying ice-cold shower. Much of the sunlight was vanquished from this shaded sanctuary, so gentle infusions of light peppered the forest floor, inaugurating some ethereal subtle qualities that effectuated the vegetation to glimmer with a silvery sheen. Better still, a whipping, invigorating wind fanned and swept through the forest charismatically, compelling the needled boughs of the trees to awaken from their sleepy slumber, and jiggle as if hundreds of hands were waving at us. But this energizing breeze nuzzled our cheeks, blew our hair back, ventilated the entire woodgrove, and hyped up our energy levels so that, like wilting flowers in the meadow, due to the heat, our flagging spirits were revived, our enthusiasm enervated.
See, I told you it would be cool in here. Not just the temperature, but the forest. It's amazing, isn't it?
He wasn't wrong. This viridescent, resplendent forest consummated my attention, with its transfixing, bedazzling beauty, its verdant splendour that furnished the forest in green, corrugating, hanging, resplendent drapes of moss and foliage. There were smaller trees, vines, shrubs, so many heavily bedecked with black berries growing under the trees, along with beguiling wildflowers, sedges, mosses, lichens and fungi, the latter growing industriously, by clutching, clinging and attaching themselves to fallen tree trunks that lie loosely across the dark, rich, fertile floor, along with a confetti of loose leaves, twigs and needles, which create a rich mulch, so that the earth beneath our feet was softly cushioned, so when we walked along the trails, it felt as if our feet were almost buoyant. Needless to say, the 2 French bulldogs, Tweedle and Twerk, were so excited in the woods, smelling everything, lifting up their legs on every available plant surface, as if to leave a marked signature behind or autographed for any other woodland animals to acknowledge.
Look at these buttes, said Eaton. Do you know the Aussies call everything buttes? And I like the word so much. I use it all the time. So does my mother. It's what you say when referring to a bunch of something. Look at these buttes.
They are buttes, I say. And you're right. It's an excellent word to use. Maybe it'll become an American slang word one day. I popped some berries in my mouth. Oh, my word! These taste so good. I now know the juices are spilling down the sides of my mouth, but I don't care. It's part of the privilege of berry picking, isn't it? Being stained with all this berry juice and enjoying the fruit al fresco. It doesn't get better than this. And dripping with juice, it's all part of the experience of berry picking. Look at us, I giggle. We're eating so many berries. Nothing is ending up in our buckets. At this rate, there'll be no huckleberry sauce on our vanilla ice cream.
Listen, says Eaton suddenly.
Shh! I don't hear anything, I say, popping some more berries into my mouth.
That's my point. Don't you get it? The bird song is gone. Don't you know anything about woods? Everything's quiet. It's not normally like this. Don't you feel as if something's watching us? Not really, I say in a nonchalant way. But you're right. The forest is unnaturally quiet. Go on, I say. Let's pick some more berries. And don't eat any more. Look, you're covered in red juice. Good job your mum's not here to see us. She'd say I was a bad influence on you.
My bladder stung with fullness. I told little Eaton to stay exactly where he was, that I wouldn't be a minute, and that was all it took. A swift moment of distraction, upon which I took a brief second to relieve myself behind a tree, and when I dutifully returned, Eaton was nowhere to be found. But the two French bulldogs, Tweedle and Twerk, whom had been running around the woodgrove rambunctiously only moments before, looked as if they'd been startled by something, as they became somewhat subdued, and were sitting with their ears pointed forward. It was rather conspicuous to me that they'd seen something, but what, I couldn't imagine. This couldn't be happening to me, could it? Of course, Eaton had decided to relieve himself as well. That is what it was. Eaton! Eaton! Eaton, where are you? The forest remained airily still. Even the stillness had a pronounced, ominous sound to it. Soon the stillness is evacuated. The woodland sanctuary becomes alive again, serenaded by the pretty chirrups and tweets of the birds, upon whose joyful song I barely even notice. Panic rises up in my body, like the angry, churning waves of a tempestuous sea that cannot be calmed or stilled. My head turns to the left and to the right, to the left and right again and again. My body moves frantically around the forest, zigzagging and whizzing through the trees, to and fro, like a remote-powered clockwork engine, burning on full capacity. I'm looking under every shrub, every leafy fern, every available piece of turf, up every tree, to find my cousin. But he's nowhere to be found. It's as if he's disappeared off the face of the earth. Has he been abducted, stalked, attacked, and, God forbid, even eaten by a wild animal? Please, God, no. This can't be happening to me. Eaton is playing a macabre joke on me. That's what it is. He's got a wicked sense of humour. This is what this is all about. Any minute now he's going to come bounding out of the trees, saying boo, and when he does so, I'm going to kill him for scaring me half to death like this. But time passes. It folds away, like the sheets being rolled back at the end of a bed. The only word strumming into my head right now is, you need to find him. You need to find him. You need to find him. I don't know how long I search for little Eaton, calling his name hysterically, but truly time has lost its grasp on reality, slipped away so seamlessly, faded into a hazy oblivion. Even the two French bulldogs have become tired and wary. They've fallen asleep by the empty berry buckets, waiting for this frantic, hyperactive bee to calm down. They eye me with a resigned, apathetic indifference. In a trice the forest darkens. The white fluffy clouds that I observed earlier through the trees become mottled and grey. The orange-gold sun sets over the valley, until she slips away behind the clouds. My heart sinks with her. I feel so heavy inside myself, as if I'm filled with cement. I walk away from the forest like a flagging flower in the meadow that has lost all its lustre after a cruel hot day upon which the life has been suctioned out of me. Of course, I knew exactly what I should do. I'm not going to pretend any different, but I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't. A little faint voice in the back of my head was whispering, "Call the police. Call the police. Call the police." But I just couldn't do it. That would be admitting defeat. That I'd masterfully failed in my responsibilities in taking charge over my cousin. It would be acknowledging the raw horror of this dreadful reality, and the aqueous understanding that things will never, ever be the same again. I knew when you called the police, it was usually irreversible, so final, a bleak outcome. I'm sorry, but that is my honest opinion. Perhaps I'd seen way too many movies, I don't know, saturated with such sadness and grim outlooks.
I had formidable visions of policemen knocking at my aunt's door, handing her a blood-soaked T-shirt belonging to Eaton. I could see my aunt's mortified reaction as she buried her despairing dark locks of hair into Eaton's shirt, clinging on to the smell of her son, weeping into the folds of the fabric. I could picture her face. It was too unbearable to even consider. I could hear her saying in my head, "Brianna, we trusted you to take care of Eaton. We trusted you. What have you done?" How would I ever be able to face my aunt again? I could never expect her to forgive me, could I? I couldn't forgive her if the shoe was on the other foot. I could envisage our family becoming estranged and alienated over this cruel eventuality and ill-omened twist of fate. The gulf between my mother and her sister would become as wide as the Gulf of Mexico, the largest gulf in the entire world. I retreated into the house, exhausted, my body defeated, drained, physically spent, completely washed out. I quickly laid down some food for the two hungry bulldogs because I had no appetite whatsoever. "I'll lie down on the bed for just a couple of minutes," I told myself. "Just a couple of minutes. Get a brief little bit of shut-eye, and then I will resume my search during the night." That never happened. I woke up the following morning at 8 o'clock with a start. The bright light of the early morning flooded generously through the windows, as the curtains were not closed. The events of the previous day were foggy in my head. For a brief second I thought Eaton's disappearance had all been but a lucid dream. I mean, that hadn't really happened, had it? Then reality held me to ransom when my cell phone rang, with my aunt's voice on the other end. The bodeful events of the previous day came flooding back to me, like icy water being sprayed on me by a water pistol, giving me that sudden jolt of reality. "Hello, Aunt Liz. How are you?" I say, my voice failing to betray the despondency I actually feel. "Hello, sweetheart. Oh, I hope I haven't got you up too early, have I? You sound a little, well, what's the word? Rather subdued. I hope my son isn't wearing you into a frazzle. Or have I just woken you up at this inopportune time? I sincerely hope not. I think we're supposed to be 8 hours ahead of you here in Italy. It's late afternoon here. I thought I'd phone you up to check how you and Eaton are getting along." My heart almost leaps into my throat. Actually, we're having lots of fun here, but like you said, well, we've been sleeping. That's why I might sound a bit, sort of out of sorts, but nothing to do with Eaton, of course. "Glad to hear it, sweetheart. Can I speak to him? I'd love to hear his voice. I miss him so much. It's that hazard of being a mother. You always need to connect with your kid all the time." I'd rather you didn't, Liz. I hope you don't mind. It's just he's exhausted after picking berries yesterday. And like you said, it's very early here. Very early. In fact, it's still very, very dark outside. Very dark. I can hear him snoring. Quite loudly, actually. He's fast asleep. It wouldn't be fair to wake him up. "You say Eaton's snoring? You're being serious?" I hear her saying to Hugh, "Eaton's snoring, can you believe it? I think he's becoming more like you, Hugh." "Really? You do surprise me, Brianna. So it's earlier where you are, much earlier than I suspected. I'm sorry. It's terribly rude of me to phone you this early, but my calculations... I thought it was 8 o'clock where you are, but I've obviously got it horribly wrong. I do apologise. I suspect different parts of Italy are different time zones. I'm so sorry to wake you up this early." It's very dark here. Very dark. And Eaton, he's fast asleep. As I said, he's snoring a lot. I don't think it's good to wake him up in the circumstances." "Never you mind, sweetheart. You're obviously showing him a very good time. Thanks for all you're doing, Brianna. I'm ever so grateful. I honestly don't know what we would do without you. But I can see I've got you at a bad time. You do sound rather exhausted. I'll phone you tomorrow early evening. Our time, I suspect, but it'll be morning for you, and hopefully by then Eaton will be wide awake. Tell him I send him loads and loads of love, and I just can't wait to see him. Lots and lots of kisses to both of you. Mwah, 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 mwah. My heart deflates like a punctured balloon. I hope to God they don't find that I'm lying about the time difference and that they smell a rat. What if they know I'm lying? All I want to do is to go back to my bed, burrow into my pillow, pull the duvet over my head, and pretend that this nightmare is just not happening to me, but to somebody else, not me. I simply have to find my cousin. But where on earth is he? There's no way I can call the police, not until I've exhausted all the other options. I just have to find Eaton. Where could he be? I leave the French bulldogs in the house with big portions of breakfast to keep them busy and close the front door behind me. I run through the meadow. The grass is blowing backwards and forwards, swaying briskly in a cool wind. The cheerful, lingering sunshine is bright. I enter the woods and call Eaton's name. But this time tears are streaking down my cheeks, as a hopelessness seems to settle over me, as if slowly and surely I'm coming to the dawning realization that all hope is lost, and that this nightmare is not going to go away, that it's real. I can't live in denial any more, can I? As I enter the woods for a brief moment, the beguiling beauty of the serene, verdant sanctuary bewitches me so much that for a second my worries are eclipsed, until I remember exactly why I'm here. I move towards the buckets which I'd left in the forest last night. I'm surprised to discover they're full to the brim with berries. In a trice, a fleeting hope bounds through me. Can I dare to hope that Eaton gathered all these berries? But then where is he? All of a sudden I feel something hitting my back. It's a pebble. Eaton! Eaton, is that you? Eaton! That's when I see her. She's indicating for me to follow her. But what is she? I remember a long while ago watching a programme on television about an idiosyncratic, ambiguous creature that may just roam the forests of North America. But never for a single moment had I believed or even entertained the thought that people's random accounts were even remotely true. I was a Chicago girl after all. We didn't believe in incongruous eccentricities like this. Yet this creature was not a trick of the light, nor a faint impression of an overactive imagination. But she was real as you or me. The creature, I am certain, is a Bigfoot. I mean, what else could she possibly be? She's easily over 8 foot tall, with a matriarch-like energy. She's all female, with large pillowy breasts. Her muscular, robust body is so firm and toned. It's as if the only fat cells in her entire body have congregated and isolated themselves to her breast tissue, abandoning the rest of her body. Her silhouette is shaped like a human being. Her arms are much longer than ours are, though, while her head is a distinctive pyramid shape, with a short, stocky neck that is barely visible, but sweeps into the shoulders in a seamless curl. Her body is covered in dark brown curtains of long silky hair, with red highlights that can only be discerned when the sunlight catches the shafts. The face she possesses is rather feminine, with high cheekbones and an oval chin. She has deep-set eyes that are a golden-brown colour, that seem so congenial and warm. I should be afraid. I mean, this creature is huge, very intimidating, lofty, majestic, solid and stoic, like a redwood tree. Suffice to say, even a 6-foot man with a large build would feel small in her intimidating, rather daunting presence. But fear does not entertain my thoughts, not even for a brief second. Indeed, I am so mesmerised and captivated that for a brief moment all thoughts of my missing cousin have floated away into the ether like a kite on the wind. I don't hesitate to follow this Bigfoot, rather like a honeybee following a trail of nectar. I'm intrigued and inquisitive about this Bigfoot. She's indicating for me to be very quiet, and that's when I see Eaton high up on a very tall oak tree, next to another hairy-looking creature that I think must be the female Bigfoot's youngling, clearly a boy. It's Eaton! He's safe! He's all right! Eaton is all right! My heart bounces with delight. The emptiness inside me fills with relief. I call out to him, "Eaton! Eaton!" For a moment he barely acknowledges me, and then his face breaks out into the broadest grin I've ever seen. "Look at me, Auntie Brianna! I'm on top of the world! I'm on top of the world! Who would ever believe I could climb such a tall tree?"
I can see that, Eaton. Come down right now. I don't want you messing around a moment longer. Get down now, Eaton. The Bigfoot female seems delighted with Eaton's interaction with her son. I think she's expecting me to feel exactly the same way. I certainly might have done if Eaton hadn't gone missing for a whole day and night. So I'm not quite so enamoured by their friendship. I think the Bigfoot female senses my misgivings and is a wee bit disappointed in the circumstances. I think she was hoping I would share in her enthusiasm about their newfound friendship. When I watch Eaton and this little Bigfoot playing together so happily, you'd never believe for a single moment they were remotely aware of their differences. They're incredibly comfortable together.
"I better go. As you can see, my cousin's in a big huff,"
says Eaton to his friend, tapping him on the shoulder and climbing down the tree cautiously. I watch his friend nod at him, as if he understands exactly what Eaton has told him.
"I always wanted to climb that tree, Brianna,"
said Eaton, climbing down with the Bigfoot female giving him a final helping hand, so his little feet land smoothly on the earthen floor.
"Moti showed me how to climb the tree. Did you see we gathered you some berries in the buckets?"
I did see, thank you. I didn't know whether to be completely annoyed with Eaton for his nonchalant attitude or to just squeeze the life out of him with the hugest, most welcoming hug, as there is no doubt I was overjoyed to see him. I nodded thankfully at the female Bigfoot. She watches me as I usher Eaton out of the forest. I think she looks disappointed that we're leaving.
"What about the berries we collected? We picked them this morning. Aren't you going to get them?"
"Forget the berries. Young man, you have some explaining to do. What the hell happened to you yesterday? I went for a pee. I told you to stay exactly where you were, and when I came back, you were gone. I was so frantic, I was searching for you everywhere. I was calling your name, but you never answered me. I've never been so scared in my entire life. I didn't know where you were. You can't imagine what I was going through. But did you give a toss about that? Did you? No, you didn't, obviously not. I don't understand it. You're a clever, considerate boy, Eaton. I don't know what possessed you to behave with such contemptuous disregard."
"I'm sorry. I got caught up in the moment when I saw the young hairy boy. He was so nice. He took me to their cave. I spent the whole night with their family. This morning when it was still dark, we gathered berries for you. I thought you'd be really pleased about that. I didn't know you would be angry. We were only having fun."
"Eaton, I want you to know something. I came this close, and I mean this close, to calling the police last night," I say, making a circular gesture with my fingers. "I was so frightened, Eaton, you have no idea. But I was scared to call the police. I thought something dreadful had happened to you. Your mother phoned this morning. I lied to her. I pretended you were fast asleep in the bedroom and snoring loudly. She wanted to speak to you."
"You told her I was snoring? I don't snore."
"Well, you do now. Didn't it occur to you for a moment that I'd be worried about you?"
"Not really. Have you ever read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe?"
"Yes, I did a long time ago. But what has that got to do with anything, Eaton?"
"Don't you see it's got everything to do with what happened to me? Lucy enters the land called Narnia under the rule of the White Witch for over 100 years, and she encounters Mr. Thomas the Fawn and then the beavers. Well, yesterday it was the same for me. I felt like I entered another world, meeting the strange hairy creatures that were friendly to me, just like the nice beavers in Narnia in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. I thought when I finished playing with my friends, no time would have lapsed, as when Lucy got out of the wardrobe, it was like she'd never been away. I thought when I returned to the berries, you would have just finished your pee. but you won't be able to believe the buckets were full of berries. I never knew the time I spent with the creatures would be the same as time here. Even my mum says the time is different in Italy. Yes, the time is different in Italy to here, but the time in the forest is always the same, even if you meet fairies, goblins or Bigfoots. That is weird, though. You really believe that you thought you'd entered another world, like at the back of the wardrobe, because you encountered hairy beings. That's exactly what I thought. I'm sorry, Brianna. If I'd known the time was different, I would have come back sooner. All right. I think I get it.
Years later, I asked my cousin if he'd ever played with his Bigfoot friend in the woods again. He said that the Bigfoot female had told her son that she didn't want him upsetting the nice lady she'd met in the woodgrove, which was why he couldn't play with my cousin anymore. I realised then that the Bigfoot mother had read my mind and comprehended that I was upset about Eaton's interaction with her son. But more mind-blowing than anything else was Eaton had engaged in telepathic communication with the young Bigfoot. I'm glad to say that after my aunt returned from Italy, it was like the floodgates were opened in our family, as we regularly spent Christmases and, of course, Thanksgiving in Idaho with the entire family, like regular American families. But I regret to say I never saw the Bigfoot female again. But I know that I shall never forget her beautiful energy, and the fact that she cared so much that she upset me still warms my heart today. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.